All right, Max Keiser's our guest for a few more minutes. Then I'm going to cover a ton of news and go back to your phone calls. And believe me, there is a ton of important news, so please stay with us here today. Max, in closing, I bought gold when it was $300 an ounce. Didn't sell it when it went up to almost $2,000. I bought silver when it was $5 an ounce. Didn't sell it when it went right up to $50. And if you look at the 12, 15-year charts, it's only going straight up. But I don't have gold and silver as a investment, even though it's been a pretty good investment the last decade, one of the best. I have it as an emergency backup because we've never been awash in so many giant inflationary bubbles. Where do you see gold really going? And in layman's terms, how are they been driving it downward?
Well, first of all, in terms of gold, the alternative would be government-issued paper. And have we heard anything in the last 2 months, 3 months, 6 months that would give you more confidence in the government? Does the NSA spying scandal and the PRISM scandal give you more confidence in the government? No, it gives me less confidence. So I don't want to be in a government-issued piece of paper, the U.S. dollar or any other fiat currency. That means that leaves only gold, silver, and Bitcoin. I put in the same category. Now, the number of ounces that I own has not changed. Whether the price is $1,900 or $1,500, I have the exact same number of ounces. And going forward, that's the key. It's not the price, but ounces, and at some point, grams. If you have the same number of ounces and grams, you have some protection against these lunatics. The price is not really the most important thing to consider. Paul Krugman is a guy who defends the status quo. The New York Times, who he writes for, defends the government, and they want more government spending, more government control. That just is not going to work. It didn't work for Stalin. It didn't work for Pol Pot. It's not going to work for Barack Obama. More government control is not going to work. I'm sorry.
Well, you're certainly right about that. And at the same time, you're saying you believe this is the beginning of the bond market imploding. You notice the bond market's been going up and up and up because that's all people think is good. And you said a year ago, that's the sign. How high will the U.S. bond market go, the Treasury market? Okay, the last bond collapse we've had was 1994. Interest rates went from 6 to 8%, and bonds lost between 20, 25, 26% of their value. Here we're talking about interest rates going from 2% to 4, 5, and 6%. So doubling or tripling from where they've been. That means that the bond prices won't lose 20 or 25% of their value. The bond prices will lose 50, 60, 70% of their value. That means that all banks are insolvent. That means the government has to come back and print, as we said, $100 trillion to bail them all out. And I know the Fed has made noise about
$10,000 an ounce.
So the Fed has made noise, the private Federal Reserve that calls itself federal, the foreign bank that has a fake name, a camouflage name, the Invader Bank says they're going to raise interest rates probably next year, and at the same time they're going to keep, though, you think, giving themselves...
No, they say they might raise, they might not raise, they might taper, they might taper. That's just all trading gimmickry for trade on inside information. While they're screwing around, the bond market all by itself, completely out of control, will collapse. And interest rates will go from 2 to 5 to 6%. That will just be a collapse, just like people who might be on the edge of a fault line will play a game as to whether or not the earthquake will hit, and they'll try to profit from it. But once the earthquake hits, there's nobody around the earthquake that's going to be able to control it. It's just out of control. And once these interest rates hit that critical mass, banks, we're going to see one of these major banks is going to come out and say we're bankrupt because we already saw this happening in Japan. Japan is already on the critical list. We're seeing banks now reporting stress because interest rates are creeping higher. Their balance sheets are imploding. They'll come out and they'll print more money. Maybe they can stave it off for another month or two.
And that parallels with decadence and corruption. I mean, anytime societies get degenerate and lose touch with reality, things implode. And unfortunately, Max, we're going to have some interesting times ahead. Thanks for spending so much time with us. Let's get that one final call from Paul in New Jersey. Paul, ask your question of Max Keiser.
Yeah, I wanted to ask him who controls the world and all. Well, I more or less know who does, but...
well, since you know, Paul, tell us.
Well, it's the big banks and the esoteric societies. They've been doing it for years. We haven't had a constitutional government since the Civil War. When we went into martial law, then came the Federal Reserve and the Communist Manifesto, and he locked it in 1933 and set up the U.S. Corporation in 1935 after the bankruptcy and set aside our Constitution.
You're right. It's esoteric societies, basically think tanks that study how to manipulate humanity and create new scams, who then lobby to dumb the public down so that we can never rival them and actually try to be free. Max Keiser, do you agree with that statement?
Well, I would just add that now you have the addition of computer programs that do all the heavy lifting and go out there and do a lot of dirty work for them.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Max, that's a final question there. From what I've been told by people with the NSA who, over the years, you know, literally, I don't go to them, they come to me and just pop up, but their info has turned out to be very accurate. And when I say NSA, contractor groups associated with it, the holy grail for 20 years has been to get enough data to be able to predict mass movement in the future, and they've now got that. And with that, they can actually manipulate the future. And so we have these control freaks manipulating our future. It's a worst-case scenario. I mean, from your inside info, is that basically what the NSA is about? People say, oh, jam it talking about terrorism. From all we know, it's not about that. It's about rigging the world economy and rigging the human culture.
Right. The human psyche is a lot more predictable than people want to admit. And if you give the government the power to play on that obvious predictive ability where human nature tends to react very consistently under certain conditions, you're giving away the power to be free. I mean, this is what we're talking about. But the prism is a prison.
The only group not in control of themselves is Jamie Dimon and Don Corzine making 50-to-1 bets. I mean, isn't that the paradox here? Is that the people running things are not in control of themselves?
Well, it's hard to understand the motivation. You know, Jamie Dimon has kids. You know, his daughter now writes for some fancy magazine. The world that he's left her is quite appalling, and he should be ashamed of himself.
Yeah, I mean, what about your children? I used to always hear this as a youth and go, kids, who cares about them? And now that I have them, that's all I think about is how do I make the world better? And people laugh at me. Oh, you're a square. You don't know how to get ahead. And they're just idiots. Isn't that the biggest con game in the world, is thinking that you're not, you know, that you're going to spoil things and not have it come back on you?
It's just the delusionary behavior that comes with omnipotence and unlimited power and no government checks or balances. There's no law. There's no deterrent. Anyone will go psychotic if you give them unlimited access to cash and no law and no deterrent. Just about anyone would start acting out in a bizarre, heinous, omnipotent, godlike way.
I wouldn't.
Guys have done.
I'm not like that.
Most people would. You know, if you give the average person $1 billion and say you can do anything you want, there's no laws, and anytime you lose any of it, we'll just give you more, then most people would go crazy, and they'll just start acting very godlike.
No, that's what history shows. Exactly. Absolutely. Wow. Max Keiser, thank you so much. I look forward to you being back with us, and thanks for writing an exclusive article for Infowars.com.
Okay, great, Alex. Glad you enjoyed it. Speak to you soon.
Yeah, tell Stacey Herbert, thanks for letting us have you longer.
Will do.
There he goes.
Now you can watch Alex Jones live at Infowars.com/show.
You'll find links to all of our content there and a free 15-day trial for Prison Planet TV.
You can also browse the network, the InfoWars Nightly News,
and over 60 movies and documentaries all together in one place.
You can watch the Alex Jones radio show live as it happens.
So check it out, Infowars.com/show.